Hi, I'm Raphael, and these are just a few of my 38 countries. Today, we're talking about Eastern Europe after I've finally seen every single country in the Eastern European Union. My overall impression of Eastern Europe was actually really good. Of course, you might not find the same level of efficiency as in some other parts of the world, but that shouldn't let you down, because you might be very positively surprised on how welcoming people are, how good the infrastructure sometimes is, how fast the internet can be, and how much money you can actually save with the lower cost of living in many parts of Eastern Europe. In terms of the infrastructure, you may be positively surprised. Again, it is of course not as developed as in the most expensive countries in the world, but the internet speed or the general availability of transportation and other infrastructure factors might surprise you in a positive way. So, for example, I was actually surprised that you can get gigabit internet in quite a few Eastern European capitals like Sofia or even in Bucharest, where you can get really fast internet and also mobile internet. That was definitely a great factor. In terms of co-working spaces, at least in the big cities, you will also have an easy time of finding one. Some of the bigger brands like WeWork are not as present, so if you're with that, then you're of course a bit limited. But especially in cities like Warsaw, for example, or in Tallinn, you can find many of the very big co-working space brands. And of course, then even in the smaller cities, you will find a lot of smaller and less well-known co-working spaces through Google Maps or coworker.com. So you're definitely covered there. So I think we paid around 60 euros for the first class trip from Warsaw to Krakow, which I think is okay, given that we don't have any special deduction card. The snacks they serve included in the price are actually quite delicious, I would say. Nothing fancy, it's like on an airplane, but still, that you get this on a train ride is special, even a first class train ride. And they have the usual drinks as well included in the price, so that was pretty good. Now the only thing was that the mobile data plan didn't really work here, so I'm not sure if it's a network problem, temporary or anything, or if just in Poland the cell phone towers are not so well aligned along the train tracks, so don't expect to be able to work on the train like you can in some other countries. So you might ask yourself, what is the top city in Eastern Europe? I know Eastern Europe is very large, so it's a bit of a ignorant question to even ask this, but what is the most beautiful city in Eastern Europe to spend a month in, or maybe even a bit longer? For me, that's actually hard to answer because I'm split. I have quite a few favorites, but I think if I had to settle for one city, it would be Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. Tallinn is very nice for me because on the one hand, it's of course a real startup hub. Estonia in general keeps rising in terms of innovation, startup, digitalization, not only because of the e-residency, but just also because the cost of living is relatively low, the tax regime is really nice, and so on. And finally, Tallinn is just a really nice city to be in, even if you don't care about the taxes or all the other stuff. For me, it reminded me a lot about the German roots that I grew up in, so that of course made it a bit easier for me, but there's a lot of things to see, especially if you're there in the summer. You can actually have a nice time there. In the winter, be careful, it might be a bit cold there because it's really far up in the north, unless you like the cold, of course. But I can definitely recommend spending quite some time in Tallinn, or maybe also in other parts of Estonia. That was definitely one of my favorites. The only downside, I guess, of Tallinn is there is not so much daylight in winter, so choose the time that you're coming in wisely. And another more recent factor is that Estonia has had one of the highest inflations in Europe in 2022. So Estonia, and especially Tallinn, is definitely a bit more on the expensive side. If you're looking for other options in Eastern Europe that are not as expensive, definitely check out Krakow or Warsaw, the capital of Poland and the capital in the south, if you will. These cities are also, in my opinion, very, very nice. They're a good deal less expensive than Tallinn and the Baltics in general, and they also have a really good infrastructure, are comparatively accessible for foreigners coming in, or just nomads spending just a month there, and also have the benefit that there's a lot of stuff you can do. You can really go hiking, eat some really good food. You're going to be covered there as well. So a lot of you might be thinking about what is the best place in terms of taxation, because if you're a nomad, you can sort of optimize that a lot, since you could be anywhere in the world, right? And if you want to go for that, there's actually a few different answers, because I think it highly depends on what type of business you have and what you want to set up. Generally, if you're the typical freelancer and you just want to have a low tax rate on your income or your company's profit, then Bulgaria and Romania are probably two relatively decent options, at least in terms of the taxation rate. Because in these two countries, you can get your tax rate down to about 10% overall, and depending on how you set it up, there might be additional social security contributions on top of that, or almost none of them. So you can definitely get to about 10% of total rate of taxes, social security, and so on, if you set things up properly, and also if you fulfill certain conditions, for example, being a small business, being a freelancer, because there are quite a lot of benefits in these two countries that you get as a small enterprise that a large corporation wouldn't get. Be aware though that both these countries have been changing their laws quite a lot the recent few years, in good and in bad ways. So if you set up your business there, be aware these benefits might not last forever, and even if you see this video in 2 years from now, things might have already changed for good or for worse. So keep checking what the current status is of the tax law, and if there are any changes in the near future. Otherwise, there might be bad surprises. One other important question for me is always, where can you find the nicest and most welcoming people? Because no matter whether you're a nomad or you are an immigrant and want to move somewhere for a bit longer, you need somebody to help you get started and to be nice and show you around and so on. And I found that in the Baltics, personally at least, I found people to be nicest and most welcoming. I'm not saying that they were terrible in all the other countries. I'm just saying that basically in the Baltics, they definitely, for me, were super nice all the time, very polite, and really made it easy to get started in a new place. However, even in the other countries, I think it is nowadays decently easy to get started with just speaking English as an immigrant or as a nomad software developer, so you will not have too big of an issue. And of course, be aware that what people say or write on the internet might actually be different from the reality, either because things have changed or because you just get a different mileage. So for example, I was really surprised that in Budapest people are super nice. And at least from what I heard before that, I always had the impression things were a bit different. So definitely go check things out yourself, because you might have a different experience. If you're one of these people who really enjoys nightlife or culture, you might be wondering what's the best city for that. And of course, I have an opinion on that. So I think you can actually have a lot of fun in most of the Eastern European capitals, so that's generally a good way to go. But I would say that Budapest is probably a good start. Budapest is big enough and has enough different influences, both historically, but also in the very modern time, with more and more immigrants coming in and making everything very colorful. So I think Budapest is probably a very good start in terms of nightlife with the different quarters that the city has. So what if you want to go hiking, you want to enjoy nature, you just want to relax or go on a Zen retreat? I have a country for you, and my personal favorite in that sense was Romania, or more specifically actually Transylvania. So if you want to enjoy some really pretty nature, then maybe stay away from the big and famous Bucharest, but instead go to cities like Sibiu or Brasov, or maybe also the surroundings of Cluj, where you can really enjoy a super beautiful nature with a lot of woods and lakes, and just have a really nice, relaxed, good time. And if you're looking for an alternative in the north, specifically in the Baltics, I can really recommend Riga, because the famous Soviet beach Jurmala is still very lively nowadays, and both the area around it with all the woods is super beautiful to go hiking in, as well as just going to the beach and having a good time in the summer at least. And you can also see a lot of really pretty villas there next to some old Soviet style buildings, which I personally found very, very interesting. So what if you're actually a startup founder, or you just want to bring your Nomad developer career forward? You need some time for intense focused work, and you don't want too many distractions, but you want fast internet and a really good co-working space. In that case, I have a few recommendations for you, and I would go more for the north of Eastern Europe. So specifically Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, and Warsaw, the capital of Poland. I think all these three cities are really good starting points. They're all relatively inexpensive, with Warsaw probably being the least expensive out of those three that I named, whereas Tallinn is actually a bit more expensive. But you can get really fast internet, you have great co-working spaces, you have really good infrastructure in terms of public transportation and everything else. So that's definitely a very good place if you want to have a focused month, or even more than that, to just focus on your business for a while and get as much done as possible. And then finally, if you just want to go to one place because that's all the time you have, or if you're maybe even looking for a place to spend more time in, what is actually the best compromise of all the places in Eastern Europe? I have to say, well, I have not seen all the places in Eastern Europe, and of course I have my personal opinion, so your experience might actually be a different one, but my personal recommendation is probably either Tallinn in Estonia or Warsaw in Poland. And if you want an alternative to Tallinn, for me personally, a close second is Krakow in the south of Poland, which is a really, really beautiful city. It's very nice to be there. It's relatively clean and organized and easy to access. It has a decent airport, so getting there is also easy. And just generally, people seem to be very friendly. And also, similar to Tallinn, there is a growing startup community. So I was, for example, surprised to see that Deutsche Telekom has some incubator space, and there's quite a few more. Many international tech companies like Zendesk have an office there. So if you're a Nomad software developer, you will easily find some friends there who speak English, or maybe also some other languages besides, of course, Polish, and can definitely have a great, inexpensive, and very nice time in Krakow in Poland. That's it for today. If you like this video, click like and subscribe, and greetings from the beautiful Switzerland and a happy new year.